Hi, I'm Michaela Mitchum, and today we're here to talk about CRISPR gene editing, designing the law to accommodate designer babies.
So CRISPR stands for Clustered Regularly Interspaced Short Palindromic Repeats. It essentially is a cut and paste tool that operates on a cellular level. Scientists are able to cut unfavorable disease-causing DNA sequences out of the human genome and replace it with favorable healthy DNA sequences that are then incorporated into the recipient's original DNA. CRISPR enables scientists to utilize genome sequencing in the form of preventative medicine.
The way you perceive a technology like CRISPR heavily relies on whether you hold a utopian or dystopian view. The utopians feel that if CRISPR meets its potential, it has the ability to be the most viable option for curing some of the world's worst diseases. However, dystopians really revolve around the biological competitive advantages that it could bring. For example, more financially able consumers would be able to make their children smarter, faster, stronger. Comparatively, on an international scale, countries could use it unethically to control the genetic makeup of their populace. So there's a lot of risk and uncertainty with the technology. So for pacing and adoption problems, the cost of mapping a human genome, an essential component to CRISPR, has decreased exponentially, causing the practice to increase exponentially. However, this is a highly controversial technology. 66% of Americans feel negatively about gene editing their children. So you see a great delay in adoption and a quick pace of pacing. However, this could create a legislative solution because legislators are unable to actively monitor the technology. And whenever Americans are finally ready to fully adopt the technology, the legislatures will be fully informed because of the long pacing process and delay in adoption process. As mentioned before, CRISPR has a quick pacing process. This closely resembles a Moore's graph established by Moore's law. The cost of mapping a human genome has dropped every 2 years by a magnitude of 10 years, if not more. Alternatively, CRISPR is probably most likely characterized by Gardner's hype cycle. It's characterized by technology that generates far too much excitement, much like CRISPR, fails to meet overblown expectations, falls into obscurity, then develops into a steady plateau of productivity. It's likely this is the fate that CRISPR will meet. It has a lot of fantastical ideas. It's unlikely it's going to meet expectations, but there should be a steady plateau of productivity coming from the technology.
For the regulatory framework, we should look to Hood's tools of government. Nodality is perhaps the most important for CRISPR. It signifies the information a government body should have in order to regulate. The legislature should adopt standardized bodies with members of the scientific community to draw certain safety and ethical red lines in the sand. So legislatures know which lines they shouldn't cross when creating legislation in order to regulate CRISPR. Authority refers to the specific authority that a government should have in order to enforce legislation. This is relevant both domestically and internationally. Domestically, it should be explicitly stated that CRISPR regulation preempts all state regulation. Additionally, the government should establish a regulating agency to fully oversee the technology, more so than the legislature would be able to. Internationally, we need the authority to create a cooperative agreement between different countries in order to ensure that CRISPR is being utilized ethically. Treasury refers to the finance and the financial assets available in order to enforce legislation. The US hasn't had any problems financing regulation before. I really don't see them starting now. And organizations refers to the type of organizational structure to enforce. And again, they should create a federal agency to oversee CRISPR. This can be done through many methods of regulation. When considering the legal implications for CRISPR, first we're going to look to tort law. This opens a whole new avenue of liability for negligence and medical malpractice. What if resequencing causes another illness in someone's DNA that we couldn't have foreseen? This creates a lot of causation issues. Sometimes people just get sick and it's going to be hard to pinpoint that the gene editing is what caused the sickness. Also, it creates a foreseeability element. Whenever you are using a new technology to resequence your DNA, we really don't know the effects of CRISPR yet. So it's going to be interesting to see how tort law develops around this technology. For contract law, we have some special guests to demonstrate how contract law could also be a liability for CRISPR users. And we're going to assume for a moment that CRISPR works on dogs.
Let's assume for a moment that you contract to have your dog look like this. Instead, your dog looks like this. That would be a breach of contract.
So for constitutional law, it creates a lot of Article 3 issues. Are we going to allow standing for someone who just ends up getting sick? Additionally, is this a redressable injury using this new technology? How are we going to be able to redress it? So there's a lot of ripeness issues involved as well. Criminal law and procedure, the Golden State Killer was actually caught because a distant cousin submitted his DNA into a genealogy website. Law enforcement obtained this DNA, identified it as a distant cousin of the Golden State Killer, tracked the Golden State Killer, and was able to identify his DNA from a discarded coffee cup. Now, I think getting your DNA resequenced by CRISPR isn't analogous to a discarded coffee cup. However, it creates a lot of issues on whether we're going to allow law enforcement to access DNA from someone who did have their DNA altered from a CRISPR provider. Intellectual property law is wildly going to be a battle of the experts. It's a really nuanced topic, and I don't think judges are going to pretend they know anything about it. And finally, there's going to be international issues with CRISPR. We need to facilitate international cooperation to ensure that the technology is being utilized ethically. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed.